We're going to start this introduction to Adobe Animate by first opening Adobe Animate CC. And I'm going to go full screen with it. We want to go to ActionScript 3.0, and that's the programming language that Adobe Animate is written in. So you can see here we have the user interface, and if you look up here in the upper right hand corner, you see you have different user interfaces depending on what kind of work that you're doing, and it defaults to Animator. So we'll go ahead and leave it on Animator, but just to give you an idea of what some of the others look like. There's Classic, which is closer to the original Macromedia Flash and Adobe Flash interface. And there's Debug for when you're doing object-oriented programming in ActionScript 3. And Designer, Developer, Essentials, and Small Screen. So let's go back to Animator. And this area here, the main area, is called the stage. And you can see up in the upper left here we have where you can select your different colors and different preset swatches and gradients. Here at the Align tab you can align your registration of your objects and your graphics. And this is for transform and info on the selected objects. Okay, here you have scenes. So when you're creating animations, you have the option to create one or more scenes, and they will play in order when you export or when you publish. And you have motion presets down here, and then default presets, custom presets, but we won't be getting into that today. Up here you have your timeline tab, and then you can see we have a timeline. Each of these little rectangles represents a frame. And if you look over here, you can see 24 frames per second. That's standard for film. And we also have set at full HD 1920 by 1080. That's actually the setting that I had. It defaults to 550 by 400 actually when you first open it up. We'll go ahead and change it to 550 by 400. And right here you can set the size of your viewer, but I already set it to the default, so we'll go to fit in window, and though it looks bigger, it's actually the same size as it was. We're just zoomed in to 238%, and that's the way it's set up on my monitor. I'm on an iMac. So we talked about the timeline, and you can see it's marked off in seconds, 2, 3, 4 seconds up to 8 seconds in this setup. And that's ending up here at 200 frames. And again, that's 24 frames per second. Now right here we have the Tools tab. So you have the different tools that you can use. You have your selection tool, and each pops up with a description of what it is along with the shortcut. The sub-selection tool is A. Shortcut is A. And then you have your 3D rotation tool, free transform tool. And you can see, again, you have your shortcut keys for all of these. Lasso tool, pen tool, text tool, line tool. And you'll notice also that there's a little mark down, kind of like an arrow at the bottom corner of some of these. If you click on it and hold it, then that shows you the other option here. This is the gradient transform tool, and the shortcut is F. And then you have under the 3D rotation tool, 3D translation tool. Translation meaning moving it up, down, or forward or back in 3D space. You have your lasso tool, and under that we also have a polygon tool. And these are for selection, types of selection. And then you have the pen tool. And underneath that is the add anchor point tool, and so on. And I'm not going to take time to go under all these, but then very important, of course, is the text tool, line tool, and on and on and on. And when we need to use each of these, then we'll talk more about them. And then you have the output tab, which gives you a readout of what happened in your actions when you've published. So let's go back to the timeline window and let's do a little bit of drawing. Okay, so we need to go to the tools for drawing, and we'll start off by drawing a rectangle. That's the first one. And again, underneath the rectangle, we have the rectangle primitive tool. But we're going to start off with the rectangle. And let's choose a color. Let's start off with red. And we'll go down into the middle of the stage. Remember, this is the stage. And you notice that now that I've drawn this rectangle, there is also a stroke outlining this rectangle. And whatever you select, the properties will show in the properties panel. And then since we just selected the rectangle tool and used it, then it shows in the properties panel what tool or the parameters or the properties of whatever we have selected or whatever we're using. So you can see it says the rectangle tool, then it shows the properties of that tool, and so you have your fill and your stroke. If we click on this stroke color chip, then you can see we have all kinds of different choices for the stroke. Defaults to black, and that's what we have here in the rectangle. And you can see the fill color chip opens up, and you can change the color to any other color that you want. Now, I just changed it to kind of a neon green, and notice it didn't change the properties of the rectangle because the rectangle wasn't selected. Now, if I select the rectangle, I can draw a selection box around it. That'll select the whole thing, including the fill and the stroke. And now you can see in the position and size, we have the properties panel. It says shape, and that's what it is. It's just a shape. It shows the position in the two-dimensional space. X is 193.1 and Y is 130 even. And the size of it is in pixels. The width is 265.45 and the height is 151 pixels. Notice when I click off of this and click back on, I can select just the one side or another side. I'm going to double click that stroke to select all of the stroke around, and we look in the properties panel and we can change the size of that stroke since it's selected. So you can use the slider and make it very thick. You can also type in the amount that you want on there. So let's type in 10, nice round number, and that's the size that we get. Now we can go back to say 3, and that's a nice manageable and visible size. And then we have different styles that we can choose, a dashed or ragged and stippled and so on. Hatched is another one. So let's go back to the solid, and then we have these other types that are available as well. We'll just leave it at uniform. These shapes that you have that are available are called primitives, and you can modify these very easily. I've deselected the rectangle. Now watch what happens when I mouse over this stroke at the top. The cursor adds a little curve to it, and what that indicates is that now we can edit it by clicking on it and dragging it any direction we want, and it will modify it interactively. So it changes not only the stroke position and the stroke shape, but the associated fill as well. So we can curve that in like that, and then we can go to the bottom and curve that down. Maybe we want to give the sensation of a curved object in three-dimensional space. Now notice when I go to the corner and mouse over it, it gives me a right angle. And so what that indicates is that it's at a point or an angle rather than a curve. And so I can then turn that in. Suppose I want to make it more like a conical type shape. I can do something like that, and I can even bring this up here and make it like a nose cone of a spaceship. And the same goes for down in this area and down in this corner here. And if I want to kind of make it a little more uniform, I can do that. Now that's with the selection tool. And now if we want to go to the subselection tool, and remember for the selection tool, the shortcut is V. The shortcut for the subselection tool, this, is A. So you can either click on it or press A, and notice that when you mouse over the stroke and click on it, it shows you the control points that you have on here. Since we started out as a rectangle, we still have 4 control points. Let's see what happens when we click on one of them. Then we get these Bezier handles. And we click on that Bezier handle, and that enables us to modify the shape. Suppose we want to modify it and make it shaped like a mushroom. Then we click on this edge, we can bring it down and pull this Bezier handle up, and same on this side correspondingly, and then pull this Bezier handle back a little bit, and we can make this a big old red mushroom shape of sorts. Now press the V key for your select tool, and if you double click anywhere on the fill, it will select the entire graphic. And let's delete that. We're going to use another drawing tool. Let's go to the oval tool. O is the shortcut. And let's draw out a green circle. And you can draw it anywhere on the stage. And if you're not concerned about having a perfectly round shape, if you want an oval, or it doesn't matter where you're going to be placing it for the time being, then you can do that and go any shape or any oval type or roundish shape that you want. I'm undoing this, but if you need it to be a uniform circle, you hold down the Shift key and click and drag it, and it'll keep it uniform. Now if you want to start drawing in the center, you hold down the Shift and the Option key, click and drag, and it will draw from the center out. Now suppose we decide we don't want the fill to be green. Press the V key for select and then click once on the fill, and you can see with that dot matrix pattern that it is selected, and you notice that the stroke is not selected because it doesn't have that dot matrix. Now if we want to select them both, one of the ways at this point is just hold down the Shift key and click on it. Now we have selected the entire graphic. But we just want to, let's click off of it, we just want to change the color of the fill. So we click on that once, we go up to the Properties panel and click on that chip, and we can, with the eyedropper, choose any color that we want that's already made. And so say we want to change it to kind of a goldish color, we can mouse over that, and there we have it. Now it's kind of a yellow-orange color. And we can, by the same token, we can click on the stroke and change that color as well. So say we want to have kind of a reddish color for the outside. As I showed you before with the modification, when you mouse over the stroke, then it gives you, anywhere you are on the circle's circumference, it will give you that curved icon, and that shows you that anywhere you want you can do a modification. If you want to make it sort of an egg shape on one side, or if you want to narrow it down, you have a pretty good interactivity there wherever you go. Maybe more of a pear-shaped or something. And as well, if you want to get into the subselection, press A, that's your subselection tool, and click on the stroke. With a circle, you've got more control points. So if you click on, say, let's click on this control point, and notice that the Bezier handles go both directions, whereas with the square we only had 4 control points and they only went in one direction. So we can use these Bezier handles to modify the shape Notice that as I pull it out, it only modifies that one side, but as I rotate it, the handles move in opposite directions around that control point pivot. Now say I want to modify only one side. You can do that by what you're doing is you're breaking the connection between these two handles. So you click on one, the one that you want to manipulate, hold down the Alt or Option key and drag it. And now you see the other one stays in the same place, and I can modify this one any way that I want. And so say we click on this one up here, and we can modify that, hold down the Alt Option key, and we just change the stroke on that. This is really handy, like if I want to make clouds or something, and you need to have that sort of fluffy look. Of course, you don't see many golden clouds with red lining, except maybe here in Texas during sunset, which is one of the fabulous things about Texas. We'll just pretend it's sunset. That's a very beautiful, fluffy golden cloud, if I do say so myself. And I do. Okay, pressing the V key for the select tool. Now let's say we want it to look like closer to being a midday cloud. And we go up to here and choose the preset white, and we can select the stroke. Now that I've broken those connections on the Bezier handle, I need to double click to select the entire stroke. You can go in here and say we want it to be a cloud, then probably a medium gray color is good for that. And you can also draw some lines in here as well. So say we want to draw a line and add some contour or some shading to it. We can simply select one of these, copy it, and then paste it. That's Command C and Command V, and it pastes it at the middle. And so we can add some extra lines to it. Say we want to add maybe one over here, copy Command C, Command V, and paste. And we can leave the lines here if we want. And then we can modify them if we want. Change the shapes a little bit. Each time you click on it, it will add another control point to where it's at. Now suppose we want to add some shading to this. Let's go ahead and connect that. Let's press the A key, do subselection, and we can modify that. And maybe we got too many control points. Let's delete some. We don't need this one here. Rotate that a little bit. And you can also, when you have one of these control points selected, you can arrow up and down to do a finer tweaking on the position. And I want this to be a little bit more curved, rounded. Okay. Since the ends of the line snapped to these edges here, now we can, that has separated this fill here from the other part, and we can color that separately. So let's select that fill now, and let's change that shading to a little bit of a lighter shade of gray. And so then that way we can add some depth to it. And maybe we want this line to not be so stark, but to be the same color as this shading. So we would go into that chip and then select that. Now it may be that your line didn't snap to the object here, so If that's the case, then I need to show you this, that this needs to be selected. That's the Snap to Objects button. And if it wasn't snapped, then you need to have it selected. Okay, and that'll cause those lines to snap to whatever corner or edge that you want it to snap to. So that's it for this introduction into drawing and the interface and the tools of Adobe Animate CC 2018. In our next tutorial, we'll be drawing a simple bird and we'll begin to animate.